Okay, these are two of our guest speakers now. We're just going to go ahead and go because everybody's got stuff going on. Johnny Barber might show up. He has a whole different take on the cover thing since he does an Elvis tribute. So we're going to have him talk a little bit about that. So our panel then tonight right now is Andy Art, who as he said is our vice president, and has PJ Zahn band. No, okay, it was just PJ Zahn. And as well as writing his own originals, and very popular young man around the area. And then Chris Kay, who's done everything from soup to nuts, and runs internet. Suresh,
no, we'll just confuse you.
I will let Chris tell everything he's done, okay, and go on. But he's quite active in the People's Fair audition process, and that makes it really nice. So we'll just kind of open it up, and just since we're such a small group tonight, I really did not expect a lot of people because between the Rockies game and some music festivals that are going on and the warm weather, we were hoping for more, but anyway. So let's just start with Chris, and I'm going to get out of the way here and come sit between Johnny and Robert, or Chuck and Robert, and you guys have at it.
All right, the only two people here that don't know me are this guy and that guy. That's it. So it's people in this room who don't know me. That's it. Those two guys that don't know me, I'm in the music business. I've been in the music business since 1970. I'm third generation, going back to 1924. Today I own Rocky Mountain Music Network. A division of that is the Colorado Sound, which is both a syndicated radio program that's currently aired on 15 station days statewide. And as well, I have an online internet radio station. I do a bunch of other things. I'm a talent consultant for municipalities, for venues. I do front of house sound. I produce shows. I MC 30, 40 shows a year statewide. So I'm pretty active in the scene.
And so if you know me too, but I'm Andy Ard, singer-songwriter. I play in a band called PJ Zahn, and we play both covers and originals, just to kind of give you an idea. Award-winning songwriter, I guess. I won a contest a couple years ago with the Durango Songwriters Expo. I'm also a composer for the White House Historical Association, and that music is actually still online for about 12 years now. And I work with Alex Rodriguez, who is coming later on a company called Artists in Sync. That our goal is to help artists make their music placement ready. And I won't get into what that all means, but it has to do with like sync licensing and placement, that kind of thing. And I guess we kick it off.
Yeah.
Here, so I don't have. Barb mentioned opinions, and it wasn't so much about opinions as fostering a discussion about some of the things involved in gigging around town. There's cover bands, there's original bands, and I've detected over the years a bit of a rift between the two, depending on where you're coming from. I mean, the typical comment would be like, cover bands suck. They just, they take all our gigs and that kind of thing. And then some cover bands are like, well, I want to work. And for 25 years now, I've been doing both. I've played as a songwriter, I've played with original bands, I've played with cover bands, I'm in bands that do both. But more to the point, what I wanted to foster was a discussion about ways that we could make the environment more conducive to both cover bands and original bands. For example, some of you might be familiar with BMI Live, or ASCAP also has a program, and CSAC, whereby you can earn royalties for playing your own songs in venues. But that also depends on the venues being dues-paying members of ASCAP and BMI, and that's a point of contention for a lot of venues as well. And other things like YouTube is slowly making it more conducive to monetize covers. Instead of just sending takedown notices, you can actually pay a royalty, that kind of thing. So, thought I'd get the ball rolling by just, if anybody's got comments, and I know I've seen some of the discussions online about both licensing and cover bands and things like that. I know you've always got some opinions to share. Want to jump in?
Well, sure. I'm going to start.
Why don't you go up there, Chuck? So David can get you the camera.
Okay, I'm going to start not necessarily chronologically, but with a little interview I've seen around the internet this week with Mary Ramos, who is the music supervisor for Quentin Tarantino. She was interviewed at the Paris Sync Summit, and that is a kind of like a taxi, you might think of it, for people involved in sync licensing. And there's a nice, if you look it up, Mary Ramos interview, Sync Summit, she says that she recommends that bands do covers on the internet of big popular songs just so they can get noticed by people and get their YouTube numbers up, and then switch the people over to their own original tunes. She talked about how she just signed a band, an acoustic band, who was doing a copy of a Soundgarden song. And budgets right now in sync licensing have been slashed. Traditionally they were 3% of a movie's budget. Now they're down to 1% of a movie's budget. This is according to Thomas Golubek at the last Sync Summit in Hollywood. They are under pressure from corporations who buy entertainment corporations. They don't have any history in music, and their idea is simply to cut costs as much as possible. Why do we have to spend $60,000 for the music in this movie when we can spend 20? So your job is to spend 20. And all the music supervisors are complaining that they just don't have the budgets that they really should have to be able to fund a movie. So Mary Ramos, she finds a familiar song, a Soundgarden song, but it's done by an emerging band. So she can get the song for much cheaper than if she were to be using the Soundgarden's actual recording. So she recommended that. And that is just this week's thought I had, just to get you more known on YouTube. And but in my own experience, when I started out playing in bands when I was 14 years old back in Baltimore, Maryland. And the culture in those days was such that nobody thought about playing original music. It was all about how close can you play the song to the record. In the case of guitar player, can you match the solo precisely? And can you keep up with the ever-changing radio? WCAO was the popular station back then in Baltimore, Maryland. And you'd learn tunes off of WCAO and go out and play, and that's what we did. It never occurred to us to write original songs. We didn't know anybody who was writing them. We thought the songs on the radio came from Los Angeles or New York, and they were written in some building in Los Angeles or New York, and if you weren't there, you weren't going to participate. So it was a whole cover band world I had coming up in high school bands, in college bands, and even in Denver in the 70s. This was a cover band town with, I talked to Chris before online about this, there's probably a dozen 6-night-a-week clubs in town where you set up your gear on Monday and you played through Saturday or Sunday, and you did 4 sets a night, and your job was basically to keep the audience there and to keep them drinking. And so because of that, they wanted popular tunes. You know, if new wave was in, they wanted new wave songs. If it was country rock days in the 70s, you needed to know how to play the Eagles. And bands, you know, could do that, play 6 nights a week. There were also Ramada Inns and Holiday Inns. You could travel from one hotel to the other, cross country, full time, being a Holiday Inn band. Playing 4 hours a night, playing covers, and you're expected to be able to do a good job at familiar songs. Even bands like Van Halen played multiple nights on Sunset Strip playing covers. If you go down to the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles, they had a poster display of the Doors playing 4 nights in a row at the Whiskey. I mean, that's almost unheard of right now. And you know, like I said before, we used to have one band playing 6 nights a week. Now we have 6 bands playing in one night. And I don't envy bands these days. It's hard to get your chops together when you've got 45 minutes to play on stage once every 3 weeks. So, in any event, we had a lot of stage time back in the old days there. The old days to me being 60s, 70s, 80s. I saw this change around here in the 90s, evolve from cover bands to a decided original band format. With the original bands came in multiple bands per night. When I say 6, that's a worst case scenario maybe. A lot of nights are just 3 bands a night. But the multiple night bands, the 6-nighters turned into 4-nighters, turned into 2-nighters, then turned into 1-nighters, and then turned into multiple bands per night. And that's pretty much the status quo. If you find a club that'll book you for Friday and Saturday playing covers, that's a vestige of the old days. And however, there's been a benefit on learning to write originals. I was in a cover band where we did all that stuff. Played I call this a jukebox and tuxedos. We were Chucky and the Cyclones. Started out as a 50s and rockabilly cover band. People would ask for Talking Heads, for Nirvana, for Frank Sinatra. And after a while, we just said, oh, the hell with it, let's just learn it. But in the 90s, we were getting $2,000 and $2,000 and $2,500 private parties. So it was not too difficult to be able to learn a variety of songs knowing you're going to be paid very well. There were probably 10 booking agencies in town calling my phone constantly. Can we play a wedding next week? Can we play a wedding next month? I had weddings and corporate parties coming out of my ears. I can remember Decembers having 15 out of 30 nights booked in a December, all playing private parties for great money. So it was good then, but right as that was dying in 1994, I decided I was going to sit down and write songs. I didn't want to finish up having been a copy band player for the rest of my life, so I stopped doing the covers and just started writing whatever I felt like writing, started playing that, eventually toured throughout the United States multiple times, did 13 European countries, and financed our own recordings. We were always independent, but we did a lot of work out on the road. And I always said that if you want to promote an original CD, you need to be willing to tour on a break-even basis. What I mean is that you don't expect you can't say I need to be able to make money to go out and do it. You just need to be able to make money to buy gas and repairs. Back in the old days, of course, you could be selling 20 CDs off the stage a night. By the old days, I mean early and mid-90s. And so 20 CDs times $10, that's $200. That'll buy your $60 motel room and your gas. And so the touring scenario was good then. There was good money out there. It was not difficult to book 5 or 6 nights a week when touring through the mid-90s. Today it is tougher. I know several bands on the road who have a hard time booking more than 3 nights a week. Now, Chris knows bands who do better than that. I can tell you about that, but that's just my experience. That touring is harder and the budgets are harder out there now. And but in any event, after doing that, in 2001, I got contacted by Pop Audio online. They said, we saw your songs on mp3.com. For anybody who doesn't know, mp3.com was the predecessor of MySpace. And you could put your songs up there, choose to give them away free or charge for them, just as an experiment. I said, oh, what the hell, let's just give them all away free. Okay, we're in greater danger of anonymity than we are from theft at this point in our career. So we gave them away for free. Pump Audio said we want to license them all. I thought it was a music business scam. We licensed them all, and it took about 18 months, and then checks started arriving. I said, oh, this is not a scam. So that had to wait for the invention of broadband internet for music licensing to be available to independent bands across the United States. Before that, you had one guy at a synthesizer at a TV studio in Los Angeles, and he was making up the bluegrass songs and the jazz songs and the heavy metal songs. That's why TV music sounded funny in the 80s and 90s. It didn't sound very authentic. And now, bands could submit their songs. So one benefit if you've pursued the original route right now is that you can be a publisher and the composer and getting publishing money. You know, when your song is played on MTV over in Germany, you're accruing money for that play. Supposedly, it's not perfect. Not all plays are fairly reported, but the advantage of originals is that you've created intellectual property, and that property can go to work for you in many ways. I've had songs 10 years after I wrote them. I've had songs be used for TV stations or an advertisement somewhere, and so that's the advantage of originals that I see versus covers. Can be guaranteed short-term money. They can be and you could theoretically go on playing covers forever, especially if you're willing to relocate to Miami or someplace where people over 40 years old actually go out to nightclubs. And so you could be, but you know, most of the cover bands I know who are older around here are gigging far less than they used to. They're doing maybe just Fridays or occasional Saturdays, corporate party bands, that is. People from the old Jerry Barnett agency, who was the king of the cover bands. And so that's my, anything else about originals versus covers? Well, you know, covers help to get your chops together. If you're an emerging musician, just the way you learn to speak a language, you have to imitate the sounds that you heard. You're learning to speak a language. Well, if you do that in learning to play an instrument, you're imitating sounds that you hear. So that's good training in a sense. You know, I don't think anybody comes up and thinks songs in sheer isolation. You know, I don't think it's going to ruin you to have to emulate certain styles. They always say, if you stick with one person, then you'll sound like a rip-off artist. But if you learn to assimilate and emulate a variety of styles, then eventually it'll all recombine and you'll leave your own stamp on it. So I think it's according to the time and place, originals versus covers. They both serve a goal, and there can be the right thing for you in your life at a given time. They both have advantages, and having done both, you know, I was ready for the switch when I went to originals, and I'm glad I did. But I probably learned something from being a cover band for a long time, playing clubs, corporate gigs. That's pretty much my perspective.
Thanks, Chuck. Let's just jump right over to Chris.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's no rules. So here's what I'm going to propose. I'm responsible for over $300,000 worth of business a year. I buy cover bands, I buy original bands, I buy festival bands, I buy bar bands, I do sound in bars, I do sound in festivals, I MC events in bars and festivals. So here's what I'd like to know. What do you want to know? Relevant to what's going on in Colorado right here today, 2014, what do you want to know about what's going on in Colorado relevant to this discussion?
How do we get more people to the original shows?
That's not relevant to this discussion. Your question is not one that is a matter of originals versus covers. Your question is a matter of marketing and branding and promotion.
What has happened with, you know, the conglomeration of promoters in this town? I mean, AEG, no particular.
Not relevant.
You know, not relevant.
So Chris, if I had a band, should I play covers or originals?
Anything you want. Here's the issue. It's not an issue of covers versus originals. Okay? The issue is marketing and branding and promotion. The issue is age. How old are you? How old are you?
50.
Okay. How old are you?
I'm 60.
So am I. Okay. I'll be 60 in 9 months. So, What it boils down to is, who's your audience, what's your venue, what's your expectations, and what's your intermediate and long-term goals? Why are you doing this, and where do you hope to play? If you're a bar band, you've got a couple of three choices about what kind of rooms you can play in. You can play in a cover room. But you can't play in a cover room that attracts a 25, 34-year-old audience if you're 50 or 60 years old.
Right.
Now, I have seen original bands pack the rooms that I've promoted, and I've seen cover bands pack the rooms I've promoted. I've seen cover bands play to 0 people and we shut the show down at 10 o'clock and close the room. And I've seen original projects play to 0 people and we've shut the show down at 10 o'clock. It doesn't matter. This issue with YouTube is an intriguing one. It is reality. If you wish to draw more people, there are 2 things that you really should do. One is you should record covers of hit songs in your era of music that plays to the people who not only you know, but to the people that they know. So, Tyler Ward had 10 million fans on YouTube and became an international star by recording songs that were written originally, performed by young women. There's nothing saying that a Katy Perry performance of a song probably not written by Katy Perry isn't a bad song to play if you're a 50-year-old, if the message inside the song is a part of your life story and connects and has emotional adhesion with people in the age group that you're most likely to play with. If you're 60 years old, you might want to go back and recover Strawberry Alarm Clock or something from Todd Rundgren. What buyers are buying is entertainment. I just got off the phone 2 days ago with a fellow by the name of Jeff Finland. He's been on major labels since the 70s. He's currently living in Nashville. He's moving back to Colorado here soon. And he asked me a simple question. What are they buying? They're buying entertainment. That doesn't mean song and dance men, because I doubt anybody in this room is a song and dance man. It means entertainment. It means connecting. It has nothing to do with the music. It has nothing to do with the original. It has nothing to do if it's somebody else's song. In fact, most people really, truly, if they went back and started thinking about it, if they went back and started listening to the lyrics in the songs throughout their lifetime, could probably identify with enough of them that those lyrics become part of their life experience, and when they get up on stage, they can cut that performance and make it a... You never fucking know one minute or another whether or not it was an original or a cover anyway, because the average freaking person doesn't fucking know. They don't know. An average 55-year-old person has no idea what happened after 1975.
That's not always true.
I said average. I didn't count the non-average. I said average. The average 45-year-old doesn't know much about what happened after 1995. Again, on average. How do I know this? If you take and you break out the age group of somebody, let's say you're talking to a 40-year-old. That 40-year-old, let's say they're 44, I'm going to make the math simple. They're 44 years old, they graduated college at 24, that was 20 years ago, that was 1994, that they graduated college. Which means that for the 8 years prior to that, going back to 1986, they were specifically tuned into an era in which, because of their age and influences and family and culture and everything else that was going on, grew emotional adhesions to music between that 8-year period, maybe a little bit past that, but not typically. So it's all about the emotional adhesion. So I told my friend Jeff Finland, I said, shit man, it's you. I said, you know, you could easily rock some Levon Helm, some Dave John Hyatt, some Ry Cooder, and then mix it in with a few things. Because you're going to play to a specific demographic and a specific psychographic of audience in a specific setting at a specific time in a specific place, And it's about knowing who your buyer and your audience is, and that's all there is to it. It's about understanding that. If you're over 50 and you're trying to be out there doing an all-original project, don't do it. You're just doing it for your own self. That's all you're doing it for. You're just doing it for yourself. Just accept that, enjoy the process, enjoy the fact that you guys want to write some songs and leave a legacy. I've always threatened that when I turned 60, I would do one album. It would be 6 at 60, and that's all you get, bitch. Okay? And of those 6, those are the only 6 I've ever written in my entire lifetime that I thought carried enough merit that I would want to leave them in perpetuity. I'm not a professional songwriter. Professional songwriters have avenues that they can sell professional songs on. I'm not a professional song and dance person, though I was raised in that arena. I was raised in that group of kids that grew up as an actor and a dancer and wanted to play the Mickey Mouse Club and wanted to play with Annette Funicello and Frank and all those cats back in the 60s. That's kind of the era that I grew up in. So today I represent over 50 artists here in Colorado. I can't think of a single one of those artists that I represent that doesn't do some songs written by somebody other than a person in the band. I hate the word cover. I hate the word cover. Okay? Because last night, for instance, I hosted a show. It was the Colorado Sound Presents the 10th anniversary of Picking on the Pooter. We had Head for the Hills was the headliner. Smack dab in the middle of the set, they busted out an old first edition song. There wasn't a kid in the band that was born in 1967 or 1968. The oldest one of the band was born, what year, Patty, 71?
Yeah.
You know, there's a band doing something from a San Francisco band from the 1960s. Bluegrass band, by the way. I also know a bluegrass band that did I Want You to Want Me, the old Cheap Trick hit, and it's one of their most popular songs to this day. I also know a country band that's recorded a couple of wonderful covers, a band called the Railbenders. It doesn't matter.
We got a couple new guys in the room, or several actually. Let's pass the mic and let's just get who you are.
I'm Alex Rodriguez.
Who are you with?
I'm an attorney.
I'll leave now.
He's also a retired musician at this point. I'm Jeff Reisick. I'm more of a business guy, but I've always had a lot of ties to music, so I'm just kind of absorbing.
Hi, I'm Jason Justice. I'm with Gumbo the Funk.
Andrea, also with Gumbo the Funk.
Joey, how you doing?
How are you, my man?
I'm doing well, thank you.
You're looking fine and healthy and full of
Get back to it.
Glad to have all you guys here. We're just doing a small group tonight, as you can tell.
Okay, I'll be honest, I didn't have much of a plan as far as how to, my plan was to moderate this but to bring here the discussion, the kind of discussion that Chris and Chuck have brought here. So if anybody else has a perspective they'd like to share on that, let's go ahead. I mean, that's actually that was one of the things I wanted to hear was that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because that addresses that argument out there, that rift about are cover bands evil or original bands not worth it. I mean, those are value judgments that
It's
really
a
don't make any
position of
sense.
ignorance.
Correct.
It's a position of ignorance.
It's a position of ignorance, says Chris. Okay, and I agree. Anyone else?
So if you if you want to record a cover and you're an ASCAP member, for instance, you just go through ASCAP to get that cover?
Chuck?
And then the other question is, there's an agency called Harry Fox, which seems a little bit off to doing other things. Can someone explain the difference in that regard between?
Okay, Chris spoke first and said my name. So I'll say it as I understand it. I don't understand everything about the music business, but my understanding is the first answer is the Harry Fox answer. that you clear it with Harry Fox. And I've never recorded a cover, and because I want publishing too. I want the song working for me as publisher and writer. And I also know that for sync licensing, it's all a one-stop business right now. They don't want to have to get permission from anyone but you. They want you to be the publisher and the writer and to control the master and the publishing. And they want to know in 5 minutes if they can use it, because they need it this afternoon for a show that's, because they got a client tomorrow and they got to show it to the client tomorrow. So, but yes, Harry Fox, I've been told. But there is a thing that has emerged called direct licensing.
That's
And
really new.
and it's fairly new, yes, and it's controversial. And there are companies out there, for lack of a better word, who produce an elevator music or some kind of mass-produced sync music, and they say, you know what, we're just going to go directly to the artist and say, okay, here's the deal we want to make you, we're going to give you this much money, and leave ASCAP and BMI and CSAC out of it. The deal's just between you and me, okay? And usually those companies want an immediate buyout, is what they want. So they're going to say, you know what, we like your tune, we're going to give you 250 bucks for it to use it in any way we see fit forever. That's the last we want to hear from you, and here's your 250. This is just the same way that like Willie Nelson sold nightlife out in front of Tootsie's Orchid Lounge in the 50s for $50. This was the old music business where people sold their songs cheap, and there was no keeping track of them or reporting or anything like that, you know. And a lot of musicians needed the money yesterday anyway, so they could be bought off cheaply. And so yeah, so it sounds like so yes, you just go right to the musician themselves or clear it through Harry Fox.
If you want to record
If you want to record somebody else's song for your album, you go to the Harry Fox agency. They're called mechanical. It's called mechanical licensing. It's called the mechanical royalties. Did I get that right? Okay. So mechanical licensing. Compulsory, I think, is something different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lawyer.
All the house.
The mechanical license covers any re-recording of the original work. The compulsory license is what happens when you don't actually have the direct contact with the musician. By you going forth and doing and making a recording without any sort of direct agreement, there is an already agreed upon standard, compulsory, that those musicians have for you to recreate that work. That's your compulsory license. So, compulsory license is a subsection of that mechanical license you're talking about.
And real quick, my understanding that covers, like if you're doing a straight cover of the song, but not derivatives. Like Weird Al Yankovic, for example. He gets permission from the artist.
The compulsory license does not cover the derivative work, and for the derivative work, I think you still have to clear that through the musician in order to get to the publishing rights for that. So.
Here's something else that's interesting when you talk about licensing. When a venue decides they want to do music, I grew up in the theater. One of the things I remember growing up being in the theater, and I quit doing little theater when I was about 21 years old, is that we had to purchase the right to do the play on the stage. Really, what the venue is doing is they're buying a blanket license instead of buying a license one at a time. So that blanket license is purchased through ASCAP and BMI and CSAC. Those licenses are what pays the publishers the royalties. The mistake matter of fact, the mistake that's made in over 99% of the cases is that nobody's keeping track. If you're in a band, and you turn that in, and you're a member, of ASCAP or BMI, then you get paid on the performance of your original material. If the venue turns in a sheet of what was played, then that venue would that allocated funding would go to those composers and publishers on those original works. So that's what ASCAP, BMI, and CSEC are. They were created in the early days of radio and recording, in fact, because what had happened was, at one time in radio, in the early years of radio, before records, musicians came in and played in studio. They played works by composers, but the composers weren't getting any royalty rights on those works being performed, and the musicians were getting paid directly. So in order to cover the cost on the composer side, they created ASCAP. In order to do that, BMI came along much later. They created this organization to collect these royalties, these licenses, in order to pay the composers. The performers were getting paid in-house. As the record industry developed, there was a big challenge in the 1930s between radio and records. Many of the companies that owned the big radio companies in the day were also the companies that were producing record players. The record players produced records that were getting played on radio, which were taking jobs away from the live musicians. Now you've got another issue that came up, and those are called performance royalties. This country does not pay performance royalties to the performers on a recording, because prior to when all of this legislation was passed, the rules that were written were to cover the composer, because the performers were getting paid by the venue, which at that time was the radio station. So there is a long legislative history in this. There's been considerable debate at the legislative level, at the federal level. These are ongoing. Most of what you see blogged about, most of what you see on Facebook about this is very superficial. There's a great deal of confusion. I know Chuck and I have seen each other's posts for a while now, and we have different points of view because he works on that side of the table. I don't. I'm in the live music and radio industry. But it's fascinating because what we've got going right now is this misunderstanding. We don't understand how royalties are actually collected in this country. There's not a simple system that everybody can either buy into. Give you an example, there's a company called Sound Exchange. The Sound Exchange pays a royalty on the performance and pays 50% of that royalty to whoever it is who owns the master recording of that performance. So if I go out and record your band live, I own the master recording, not you. Now you might by contract purchase that master recording from me, but until then I own the rights to do what I want with the master recording, not the underlying composition. The underlying composition has a different copyright structure and a different royalty structure. So in the case of Sound Exchange, if you're getting digital radio airplay on that, the owner of the master recording gets 50% of that royalty structure. 45% of the remaining royalty goes to the featured artist on the record. Typically, that's the lead singer. Because most people, days gone by, if you follow this up, the band was a hired group of bands backing a performer, an artist, a singer, dancer, whatever that person was, the band was getting paid. So under the Sound Exchange royalty structure, 50% goes to whoever owns the copyright, the master recording, the other 50% gets split 45% to the featured performer on the recording, and the remaining 5% to the other musicians on the recording. And the rates are established by Library of Congress through the CRB, Copyright Royalty Board, as an act of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act in 1996, 1997. So when you stream stuff online, if a radio station streams online, they pay this Sound Exchange rate. If you're getting pure play, you're getting that Sound Exchange rate. And the reason why most people don't get anything at all, because they don't know that they have to go sign up to collect the royalties. So that's kind of irrelevant to this issue of covers versus originals, and kind of gets away from the core of that discussion. But if you are going to record a cover song, if you want to record your favorite song by Strawberry Alarm Clock, you got to go to the Harry Fox Agency and buy a mechanical license to record that song, and it's good for X number of copies.
So this is related to the ostensible topic of the conversation today was about cover bands versus original bands, but since we're on the topic of recordings, originals versus covers, in any case, I just want to point out that, like Chuck alluded to, you have to have your agreements and your paperwork wrapped up. So there's a concept that Alex and I have been working on called placement ready, which is all that means is that when you have a contact with someone who's talking about sync placement, licensing, that you've got your song, your tracks in the correct format that they need, and that you have all your agreements, be they song agreements or band agreements, and any underlying compositions, like if they are covers, that's all wrapped up. And I had a question for you, but I forgot it already.
I'd like to add to that.
Different companies using your songs have different degrees of indemnification they demand. In Nashville, some of the companies want to see that the singer on a recording, if you have the publishing or if you're the author, they want to see that the individual members' sign-offs as a work for hire. Okay, they don't have that in Los Angeles. I've never been asked that in Los Angeles, but Nashville wants to see that you're recording with your band. If you're the writer and you're the publisher, that they want to know that after they've used this song on a popular TV show, that the singer on the record is not going to come after them and say, hey, we were doing that, you know, as a group collective effort, you know, and so I should get part of the publishing on that, you know, or part of the song authorship. They want a piece of paper to preclude that. Usually all agreements like that arise as a result of a problem that has already occurred. A problem occurs and they say, okay, from now on, we got to have all song owners show us the copy of their work for hires from the musicians from the record. But interestingly enough, I see this from Nashville, not Los Angeles.
Okay, and since
Chris, this one's actually for you. We have a lot of national acts come through Denver. How do we coordinate some of our local musicians to come up with tribute albums in order to kind of coincide with some of the buzz that's going on with some of the national acts coming through? For instance, Morrissey came through recently, and I've got a lot of friends that are really hooked in that music, and I've also got a lot of local artist friends who are really hooked in that music. Is there any way to capitalize and synergize those two things together?
The fastest growing segment of the cover thing that I see in Colorado today is the tribute band. They're worth more money in most regards, especially the good ones. It's a very cyclical thing. You know, it's pretty funny. I was on tour in England in 2000 with my band, and one of the things that I thought was hilarious over there was how many freaking tribute bands there were. It was like, it was amazing. I was blown away. I mean, they're not cover bands. They're full-blown, dress like, look like, sound like, Nat's ass, down to the T. Holy crap, that's a tribute band. Now, among the hippie set, that means something different. I'm coming up working with a band in July. It's a Colorado Sound presents A Night with the Dead Floyd at the Mishawaka Amphitheater. It's a combination of Grateful Dead and Pink Floyd. They're doing like a Wish You Were Here kind of thing, okay? That's going to sell out. That's going to be 1,100 people. It'll be packed. It'll be sold out in advance. So this concept of tribute bands, I love the idea, and I think that at the municipal civic level, I think there's a lot of market reach in that. I don't see where the reach is, though, in connecting the two. In other words, if you got Morrissey coming to town, can a local band then turn around and do a tribute album for Morrissey, right?
Not just one band, but a collective of local bands as well. One of the things that came out in, I think it was like 2011, 2012, was this Pixies tribute album called Dig for Fire. It actually started pulling up the charts on that one. It was basically all Pixies covers.
You know, I don't see any down. I don't really see.
I don't see any real downside to doing something like that if you can pull it together. I think there have been some wonderful tribute records. There have been a couple done here in Colorado over the last 40, 50 years that I thought were magnificent. Probably the one that immediately comes to mind, the greatest tribute record that I've ever purchased, was the one that they did for Graham Parsons back in the 90s, you know, with a whole bunch of alternative country rock folk. At the local level, I don't recall it. You know, I'm trying to look through my mind at my music collection. I don't recall ever seeing one come through my door, but it's a fascinating idea. It would be an intriguing idea to see if you could pull a bunch of bands together to do a tribute to a specific artist that hasn't come to town, but is coming to town.
Then there's like Journey, the Journey band, you know, who's got so tight. Because I know my brother, you know, he sings Journey, and now he's kind of been blackballed from that Journey experience. Like, he can't sing Journey anymore. Pretty Lights, or Lights, just Lights. And
that's outside of my wheelhouse, brother.
Is it? Okay, but Journey has it down to the T, where they don't let anybody do their stuff unless they know they're going to get something out of it. It's pretty tight, pretty tight. I mean, that's one band.
I could see that.
That sounds like a licensing thing.
Yeah, I could see that. Sure. They might hold certain copyrights.
Yeah.
This is kind of like ancillary to the topic, I think, but there is a venue here in the metro area that will actually charge the band an ASCAP fee.
That's against the law.
Really?
Yes, it is.
So, okay, well, I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And I could name names if you want.
That sounds like a case for a net. Yeah, that was actually covered. Do you know what I'm talking about, Andy? I think Dick Wiseman just actually covered this in the 2 workshops he did. And no, because there are some clubs. I even got a call from Fort Collins. A musician from Fort Collins wanted to know that. So I talked to Tracy Berlin at BMI, and can't think of who I talked to at ASCAP. But no, that's against the law, and if they're doing that, we really should know about it.
All I would add to that is document everything. Like if someone says they're charging you a fee for playing covers in a bar, to cover their ASCAP fee, just get that in writing.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, they're not asking me what's in my set list, right? But they'll pay you to check, and it's there on the check stuff.
Wow.
So I've got the stuff.
Document everything.
No, that's, and I know why.
Because if you're paying, especially if you're paying originals, you're supposed to be getting paid for playing those songs because you're providing the entertainment. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're entitled.
If you're playing original music in a bar and you are a member of ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC, and you turn in your playlist to your performance rights organization, they will pay you a royalty for your performance of your songs in that venue.
Okay, so part of what we're playing are Jason's originals that are copyrighted, they're registered with BMI.
So you send in a set list of those original songs to BMI.
BMI Live.
BMI Live, and you will get paid for your performance of those songs at that venue.
Okay.
And you should not be paying to play them.
I would love to know who I can run this up the flagpole, this issue.
Andrea.
Yeah, I can tell you what, Dick just covered this.
The venue, Lansdowne Arms.
It's the reason they're doing that is 2 reasons. One, they don't want to be paying the ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC license fees. 2, they're trying to recoup those fees from you, and that seriously was covered somewhere. Alex, do you know anything about this?
They don't know. They don't know.
That's like paying an Obamacare tax at a restaurant or something. You know, have you ever seen that in the news?
Yeah.
It's a protest. It's someone's being a jerk about it because they don't like the way things are going.
That or they're ignorant.
That or they could just be ignorant. You know, listen, I've run venues. Seriously. When the first time I had to sit down and read the ASCAP contract or the BMI contract and try to understand it as a general manager of a venue, holy crap. They did. I'll bet you 99 to 1 that they're doing this strictly out of ignorance, and they don't know that what they're doing is illegal. They haven't been told and haven't been shown in the contracts. They haven't been shown the law.
So this actually brings us back to the original topic, the whole covers versus originals. I mean, going back a few years, I've actually lost gigs because a venue didn't want to pay. Like an ASCAP rep came and talked to the venue, and they said, oh, they wanted to charge us thousands of dollars, and we're not paying that. So they fire all the bands.
That won't work.
Well, it didn't.
It won't work.
I only know of one case that has been proven in a court of law. There may be a couple of others, but I only know of one. It doesn't matter. If there is music in that venue, if you're a bar, restaurant, whatever, and there is music in that venue, it doesn't matter who wrote it, who it's like, it doesn't matter. The venue has to pay ASCAP and BMI. There's no way around it. It doesn't matter if they make you sign 50 contracts that say that what you're going to play is original material, because the minute you play an original song that you've licensed to one of those agencies, you are now no longer playing an original song. It may be that you wrote it, okay, but really what they're saying to you is, we don't want you to play anything in here that's been licensed to ASCAP or BMI or CSAC. That's what they're saying, okay? And I've seen these contracts. I had to rewrite a couple of them for a couple of pizza joints that didn't want to pay ASCAP BMI, so they didn't have a radio on in their pizza joint. Now, if they had a jukebox in there, the jukebox company pays the ASCAP and BMI rate. That's built into the jukebox company pays that side of the table. Okay? So the rule is real simple. If you're playing original material and you're playing in a room, the room has to pay ASCAP and BMI. If your original material is licensed with ASCAP or BMI, you provide a playlist of those songs to your performance rights organization in order to collect those performance royalties. The songwriting royalties. That's what you're entitled to, is the royalty on the songwriting, not on the performance, and you get paid the performance fee in your upfront deal with the venue.
So one other point real quick. It's a principle to keep in mind: when music gets played, somebody's getting paid.
Yes.
It might not be us. It might not be the musicians. But that's our job to go see to. And one point I wanted to make on the ASCAP BMI issue with venues that don't want to pay those issues. I think that's something that the music community could be doing to help them. Like you said, it could be a problem of just ignorance. So we can help people, venues that is, learn more about the issue and make them feel better about it, because I've heard venue owners complain about it. It's like, I don't want to pay to have music in here. They also don't want to pay for, more for French fries or, for help. So that's just more of the same issue.
I'd just like to mention that I played at the Lansdowne Arms 2 years ago. The same thing happened to me. And I still have the contract, I'm sure, on my computer. And what's weird too is they paid me 3 months in advance for the gig, okay? Just to show you what a corporate kind of place it is. So and another thing I encountered along those lines is when I was playing the 31st Street Tavern in Pittsburgh. They have a sign that's permanently above the bandstand, and it says, "No covers."
I got to tell you, quite frankly, Herman's Hideaway started the same way. Did you know that? Way back when Herman owned it, that's one of the reasons originals got so popular in Denver, was because somewhere along the line, as Chuck said, everything was covered, and then all of a sudden it just went to original. And the reason that happened was because all of a sudden people like Herman said, hey, if I have original bands in here, I don't have to pay the ASCAP and BMI fees and stuff. Well then, of course, then what happened was some band that didn't know got up and played a cover, and wouldn't you know, there was some ASCAP guy sitting there or something, and go, ah, you you owe us for the license, you know. And then somewhere along the line, they decided that it didn't matter whether you played originals or covers, like Chris said, you know. Now it's become your song because, or it's a cover that you're playing of your song. And so anybody that's doing any kind of music, recorded or live, should have the ASCAP, BMI, and or CSAC licenses. So.
I think we're kind of getting to the heart of it. Actually, one of the things I was talking about at the outset was more of the musician's perspective on things, the bands versus covers, but it actually ends up being something more of a venue issue, where, like Barb was just saying, the venue, where the first time I lost a gig because of the ASCAP issue, what they said was, hey look, the ASCAP people came around, could you lay low for a while, just don't play any covers and maybe see about playing originals. Like we've been saying, that's not going to work because eventually those songs will be licensed with someone, or they'll be registered with ASCAP or BMI.
And nobody knows who wrote what.
Right, and nobody knows who. But further, it's I consider that mostly an issue of education and awareness, and really getting over that hump of like it's one more fee for venues to pay. And I get it; they hate paying more. It feels like extortion. I've talked to owners who say, look, everybody's coming at me, everybody wants more money. It's like the mafia. Everybody's just coming at me, they want fees. I get it, but as a musician and as a songwriter, I'm kind of on both sides of the fence. I see both sides of the story. I understand that they have an issue trying to pay more money for things, but as a songwriter, I like to get paid for playing my music. So, more rants? Anyone? Thoughts? Where are you on all this?
Just enjoying learning so much.
Did anybody bring a rant that they didn't get to share yet? Oh, want to introduce yourself?
Who are you?
Everybody else knows everybody else, so.
Hi, I'm Jenny Lehman. I have a question, Andy. If you play your originals, you're registered with ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC, you turn in your royalty sheet, and it turns out that they didn't have, because you don't even have to talk to them, to the bar, about that, because that's your own, well, technically, right? Okay. So what happens then if they didn't? Are you still getting paid by ASCAP, or is ASCAP just banging on their door? And
that one I don't know yet.
Here, wait, but refine your question.
Okay, so you go and you play.
You're a singer-songwriter?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a license with BMI or ASCAP?
I haven't signed with them yet.
So until you do that, you make nothing.
Right, I know.
Okay, so
but after I sign with them,
let's say that you sign up with BMI and you go play a show. You submit that playlist of your songs that you wrote to BMI.
Right.
Get it? It has to be certified by the venue.
Oh, it does.
It has to be certified by the venue, and they have to show that you played there.
Okay.
Somebody has to somebody has to sign that you played that venue on that date, and that this was your set list.
Oh, so you're gonna go if
and you submit that then to BMI, then BMI gives you the appropriate royalty value for that performance.
Okay. So that's when you run into trouble if there is going to be any.
I always figured that was one way that they might use to find venues that aren't compliant.
When I find a venue is not compliant, I turn them in.
What'd you say?
I said, when I find a venue that's non-compliant, I get on the phone and I turn them in.
Yeah, Dick Weissman even said yesterday that it's kind of a sneaky thing, but he said it's important that you do turn in your set list and that, because BMI and ASCAP, and they should have already a running list of venues that have paid their licenses. So when you click in and you say, hey, I'm Jeannie and I played Herman's Hideaway, it should pop up. But if you play Joe's Bar and Grill and it doesn't pop up, and they look at it and they go, wait a minute, Joe's Bar and Grill is doing live music or playing songs and they don't have the licenses, so they'll go out and get them. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation for the musician, but on the other hand, it is totally not fair because you're not getting paid what you should be getting paid, you know?
And the last time we had a gig here, remember when we played the Foreclosure Blues here, which is registered with ASCAP, I did report it, and yet there was nothing on the reporting form that said certified by who. They asked for the address and the phone number. But
always get your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Okay?
So I mean,
because if it becomes an issue of your word versus somebody else's word, and you don't have documentation, nobody signed off, even if you don't have to submit it, get your set list signed off by a venue manager. That you were there on that date and you played. So if there's ever a question, somebody signed that piece of paper as a receipt for your work. It's your work.
But this was just a single performance of a
You're
song
going to run
that's
into a lot of
registered.
situations like that in Colorado. I mean, you know, you're going to run into little situations where you're playing in a park, you're playing at somebody's house, you're playing in a little room somewhere, and they don't typically do music. I mean, you're going to run into all kinds of exceptions to the rules and what have you. I'm telling you that as a general rule of thumb, in my business, okay, that these are the standards that we apply to our business nowadays. That when we book a band, those bands, if they're a member of ASCAP BMI, I would like to see them make sure that they submit that playlist to their performance rights organization. Because otherwise, they can't get paid, because BMI and ASCAP is only going to pay on an aggregate value in the top 100 markets in the country. And it's for a public performance. That's what the license is for. It's for a public performance. Whether that public performance is radio, television, whatever it is, public performance is a public performance. And if the sponsoring entity did not pay the license to have you perform that music, they're in violation of established U.S. law. Am I right?
So Chris, I mean, when you play music on your web station,
yeah,
do you have to submit like a monthly of what you wrote?
Yeah,
or what
Okay, for those who don't know, I do two things. I have a syndicated radio program that's heard all over the state of Colorado. Currently I'm on 15 station days a week here in Colorado. We're working on expanding that. I also have an internet radio station that's on 24/7. The radio stations pay ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and Sound Exchange if they pay Sound Exchange if they stream their content on the internet. Okay, if they don't stream, they only pay the songwriter publisher royalties established under ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. As an internet radio station owner, I buy a license to play what I play on my show. That license covers all the entities, all four major entities. So it's a blanket license established by the company that I'm under their umbrella of. So my internet radio station is on Live 365. I pay in until I reach about $2,000 in revenue. Once I hit $2,000 a month in revenue, 50% of that then has to go to Sound Exchange. That's the argument right now on the royalty structure side that's going on all over the internet with internet radio. Most of these infographics that you see concerning royalties and all of that at Spotify and Pandora are complete and utter nonsense. They're nonsense because they're not factoring that there's different types of royalties. It gets very, 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 very complicated. There's a royalty for a indirect stream versus a direct stream. If it's a downloadable, in other words, it's interactive. It's called interactive or non-interactive streaming. So if you can manipulate the stream, such as Spotify, okay, that's different than if you're listening to the Colorado Sound Live 365, where you cannot manipulate what you're streaming, or with Pandora. So there's both, see? So all of a sudden, if you want to get into this royalty conversation, then we're going to need 4 attorneys that all have experience in understanding the intricacies of the royalty structure in America in order for them to even try to begin to figure out, which a lot of them can't do, the intricacies involved currently in U.S. copyright law and royalty structures in this country. I advise that when you see these infographics and all of this hyperbole and all this nonsense on the internet, that you shake a little salt over your shoulder and go, there's a lot more to this story than what we're seeing on the surface here, and there is. It's incredibly complicated, and I know pros in the business that are at a very, very high level who do not understand it. It's not simple language, it's convoluted, and it goes back to the 1930s, and a lot of it's meaningless today. So, at the original versus cover concept, if you're doing original material, make sure that you have an ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC, that you're a member of one of those. If you're a performer performing the songs you wrote, then you also want to be a member of Sound Exchange. If you are the owner of the master recordings, then you want to belong to Sound Exchange. If nothing else, if you do those basic things, if you get traction, and we're talking tens of thousands or millions of streaming bytes. We're not talking going out like buying a CD and paying $1 and you're getting 80 cents on the dollar. It's not the way this game works. It didn't work. It doesn't work in radio this way. The analogies between online and radio, there's a big misunderstanding in there. If I play a song on KBCO, the chances of it getting heard one time only happens if I play it 8 times or 6 times in 24 hours. I get a chance of it getting heard once by my average listener base. So if my average listener base in that quarter hour was 10,000 sets of ears, okay, in order for part of that song to have been heard once in that quarter hour, it got heard by 10,000 people. It's not the same as when you go on Spotify and 10,000 people hit your song on Spotify. The math is different. The math is different. So, and again, it's very complicated. I'm not even going to pretend that I even understand 99% of it. Okay, I only play in this game at the level that I look at when I'm looking at concerts in fields where they're not buying licensing, and an ASCAP guy comes in and shuts a festival down because there's no license for the performance of those songs. That's an issue. It's an issue when a coffee house decides they want to try to get around the law by saying you can't play anything that you didn't write. Well, how the hell do they know whether you wrote it, 1? And 2, what happens if you're a member of ASCAP or BMI? Now, you're just in violation of the agreement with the venue that doesn't want to pay the license. You see? So, all I can advise you to do from my side of the table is belong to the organizations that are designed to protect your rights as songwriters, as publishers, and if you're looking at royalties from a performance side on the digital side, make sure you belong to Sound Exchange.
Beautiful summary. And we got any more like maybe we've got time for one more question, and I think we'll go right to the networking part of things, because that's where a lot of magic happens. Any other questions, comments, rants?
Can I ask this, since I'm here and I don't get down here very, very often? Any of you guys have any questions of me relative to anything going on in Colorado music today? Whether it's from the performance, festival side, radio side, anything that you want to know about radio in Colorado or anything else, I'll be happy to answer any of those questions while I'm sitting here.
Again, you know, to my irrelevant question earlier.
Yeah.
You know, for folks like the smaller individuals, again, I mean, you have the Lammer Lounge, Metal Arc, I mean...
Sure.
But where's the break off, or how do you get into the other venues? I mean,
What other venues would you like to get into, sir?
well, I mean, if you're dealing with a band that, like you say, does covers and things of that nature, but you know, if an original band wants to break through to the other side and do larger rooms, I mean, what's the cutoff?
So the answer to your question is asses and seats.
Asses and seats.
Asses and seats is the answer to your question. Okay?
And it all has to do with YouTube.
Nope. It has to do with asses and seats.
But how do you get those asses into the seats?
Now if we all had that answer, we'd all be billionaires, wouldn't we? Look, I know bands that do this. I know bands that do this for a living. I know bands right now that I have to write checks to for $10,000 for one single 90-minute performance. I know bands that I write checks to for $150 for a 45-minute performance. The average band in Colorado today is making about $700 on what we call a hard money show, during the hard money season, which runs between now and mid-October. Okay, this is where your civic events, your municipal events, and so forth. What it really boils down to is you got about 3,000 acts working in Colorado nowadays. Of those 3,000 acts, there are about 30 of them that can legitimately run a business off of what they're doing. If you're out there just an everyday Joe band out playing the game, 99% of the time you're out there doing it as a hobby. And even then, you may not make enough to support your hobby, because it really truly is about asses in seats. It's about tickets sold, it's about revenue through the door, it's about the number of people. If I book a band and nobody comes out to see them, which has happened more than once, okay, I have to judge where that mistake was made. Was it a mistake on my part? Okay, or is there something else underlying in that equation? So questions that I typically tend to ask myself are, does the band have a following where I want them to play? How big is that following? So if you're at a certain level of the game, we have measuring via mechanisms that we use. We can use Polestar and others to determine whether or not you're pulling numbers and in what size venues you're playing and where in the country you're playing and that sort of thing. If you're over 50 years old and you're trying to play the Meadowlark, what the fuck, dude? Seriously. Okay? The only way that you're going to break through the Meadowlark crowd as a 60-year-old, okay, is if you're doing something so completely original and authentic, or something so old and authentic that the kids just automatically are going, holy shit, this is cool. Okay? 99% of us aren't going to do that.
Right.
So 99% of us, and this goes for me, look, I'm a player. I've played all over this country, in Europe, everywhere else, okay? In Colorado, right now, if you're in our age group, okay, you have to know your audience. You're not going to build new audience. You're not going to get to that major, you're not going to headline the Mishawaka if you can't put 500 people through the door.
But I mean, you don't have these, I mean, all these lists of all these flippin' weird names of bands. Are they all bringing an audience? Like,
yes, they either do or they don't.
Right.
And they are responsible for their own audience. The only places in Colorado, where you're not responsible for your own audience is a municipal gig. People's Fair. 5 Points Jazz. Municipal events, what we call civic events. This is where the money is in Colorado. There's roughly 1,250 of these event days a year in Colorado today. There's 450 event days just in Denver a year. Most of them are what we call muni or civic buys. It's the Arvada Fest, it's Broom Fest, it's the Downtown Concert Series. It's these little events that are paid for by civic organizations or by the cities themselves. This is where the game is played today. This is where, you know, those of us who are 60-ish, if you will, those of us who remember the days, Chuck, when we used to go out and rock a room for 4 or 5 nights, sometimes weeks on end, right? Sometimes they'd have a house for you to stay in, and you stayed there for a 3-week or a 6-week run and play the room 5 or 6 nights. That's the game I grew up in under my dad. Okay? So those days are gone, so where's the money? Well, where are the crowds? The crowds aren't in the rooms. The only way that you're going to get a room is as a promoter. I'm looking at you going, I got a room. Do you need it? By the way, if you don't have a fan base, you're going to play to an empty room. And that's going to piss me off, because I just dropped $1,000 in electricity and overhead and everything else to bring you in. Plus, if I gave you a guarantee, I'm out the guarantee plus $1,000. So if you want to play to a captive audience nowadays in Colorado, you book the Muni and Civic circuit. How do you do that? Well, I'll give you some numbers. Bohemian Nights at New West Fest is the most prestigious Colorado music event in the state today. We're going up in its 10th year. It draws 200,000 people a year. It's spread out over 3 days now, across 6 stages. We book approximately 72 to 75 acts, not counting the national headliner that we put on the stage on Saturday night and Sunday evening. Of the 72 acts that we book for that show, approximately 36 of them are holdovers from the previous 3 years. So that means we're going to book approximately 36 acts that weren't on that stage over one of the last 3 years, right? Out of the 36 acts that we're going to book, we're going to go through 1,500 submissions. What are the odds that you get picked out of 1,500 bands if I'm only buying 30 or 40? 2%? 2.5%? Would you play those odds in Vegas?
But how do you know which bands to pick? Are you looking
Well,
at the
okay,
numbers?
so hold on, I'll answer your question. So at that level of the game, how we know what bands to pick, so the municipal buyer, okay, the gal that books for Inglewood, Littleton, Arvada, Brighton, wherever, okay, that buyer is predominantly, in Colorado today, a woman. Predominantly, she's early 40-something with a couple of kids. And predominantly does not go out to see live music. Has no freaking clue, one, whatsoever, what the hell is going on out there. So she typically tends to buy A, what she already knows, B, what she's already comfortable with, and C, what her 42-year-old girlfriend with 2 kids won't get pissed off at because you just put that on stage. Beyond that, it depends on the event and who's running the event. So in the events that I'm involved in, if I do a show every year. It's called the Carbon Valley Music and Spirits Festival. We just moved it to a 2-night show this year. Historically, I always book a Colorado legend to headline. So I got 5 bands I'm going to book. How am I going to book? Well, first thing I do is I book my headliner. The amount of money that I spend on my headliner is going to depend on how much money I have left in my pot of money to pay the remaining 5 acts. So if I've got a $10,000 budget for talent, let's say, and my headliner costs me $8,000, I have $2,000 to spread across 4 bands. So who am I going to buy? I'm going to buy people that I already have relationships with. I'm going to buy people who I look at and go, that's a good match, that's a good match, that's a good match, holy shit, that guy can sing his ass off, I want him. When we sit down at the People's Fair every year, we're getting 1,200, 1,300 online submissions for these events nowadays. We're getting 300, 400, 500 submissions for the People's Fair for a show that maybe we're going to book 30 new acts this year for that show. So if we take 300 or 400 submissions to call down to the 70 that we're going to put on the UMX, and then out of that we're going to put 30 on the stage, and you ask me, how do you decide? If I'm picking a downtown show, I don't want a new band downtown unless they're an opening act that I'm paying $100 to. I don't want a new band up there. I want a name playing that show. I want Chris Daniels. I want Hazel Miller. I want Wendy Wu. If I have the money and I can afford to drop $15,000 or $20,000, there's some other names I can throw out there. And there's several in Colorado that charge that kind of money. Okay? But most of these municipal events don't work this way. Most of these municipal events are working on a $500 sound budget, and if they need a stage, they need to get a stage in there for under $1,500 if they can get away with it, and that's with a lighting package. So maybe they're a couple of $1,000s heavy in the deal on the production side. Now they got to try to put together the talent side. Well, if that top tier of the guys like Chris Daniels and what have you are racking $2,500, 3 large on the deal, okay? All of a sudden, now you've got a $5,000 show before you even got to thinking about anybody else on the deal. You got a $5,000 show. Some of these shows, the one that I work, some of these shows are $50,000, $60,000. Some of them are $500,000, $750,000, $1 million on some of these shows. So yes, asses in seats. Name brand. Brand is critical. If you cannot establish a brand, you cannot even get to first base in the music business today. You have to have brand.
So is that Again, if you have a band name, that's the brand.
No,
No.
that's the name. Patty,
You forgot to mention the best part of it all.
what's that?
They don't bring their A game.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, this is something that's very fascinating about what's going on in Colorado nowadays with so many bands out there working. You better bring an A game. And when I say an A game, I don't mean your A game. I mean you better be able to play the championship game. You better damn well be able to play the Super Bowl if you want to get to having me write you a $10,000 check. You better damn well be able to get to the championship series if you want me to write you a $2,500 check in Colorado today. And if I'm building a show around a couple of $500, $700 bands, I'm taking the most skilled bands I can find. Skilled. Skilled. Skill matters in Colorado today. I cannot tell you, we went through 1,500 online submissions for a show, and we had interns blowing through them at 8 to 10 seconds apiece, blowing through them going, suck, 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 suck.
Right.
Skill matters. If you can't sing, let's get on this topic of singing. Bob Dylan could sing. He was a very compelling vocalist. He wasn't a singer. He was a very compelling vocalist. You have to be compelling. You have to be able to sing. You have to be entertaining. You have to be able to entertain an audience. Nowadays, buyers are using YouTube a great deal. I firmly advocate that you do YouTube. YouTube is the end-all and be-all of our business nowadays. People's Fair this year, you had to submit via YouTube. There wasn't any other option. You had to submit via YouTube. We sat at a committee meeting, 9 of us on the committee for Bohemian Nights this year, and for the bands we didn't know, that like if I suggested a band, from the records that I've got, and everybody else met immediately, the gal that was our secretary for the committee meetings, she's online bringing it up on the screen so we can watch a video of that band. We don't want storyboard videos, we want live performance videos, usually at least 2 camera if you can do it, 3 camera if you can. We want to see what the band looks like in person, on a stage, in a good room, or at a good festival event. And we want it done well. If you don't come to the table, if you come in with a cheesy video recorded on an Android phone or an iPhone, and you bring that to the table and you submit that to me, you lost in 3 seconds. Flat. You're done. You bring me a camera shoot, this nice camera shoot, high definition, good audio, I can hear the singer, I can hear the band, it's got good definition, it's done well, the band looks and acts professional, and it looks like they're kicking ass, and we can tell by looking at it that you're kicking ass. You just went into the next pile of consideration up. Now when we book a show, we start from the top down. So we start from that headliner, we start going all the way down. So if we're booking a 60 or 70 band show, and there's only a few of those, if you're booking a 60 or 70 band show, you're looking for the best of the best of the best all the way down that line. So by the time we get down to the baby emerging bands that are just coming out that nobody's ever heard of, and we know we're going to drop $200, $300 on their 45-minute shot, we're again, skill matters. We're looking at the best of the best we could buy for $200 or $300 to fit that position in that festival, because that's where we're at the game for that first act that's going to pay 11 o'clock on one of 6 stages across the city.
But it still comes down to you two.
No, it comes down to you, not YouTube. It comes down to you, not YouTube.
What do you mean by skill, Chris?
Skill. You got to be able to play. Bottom line, skill. Bass player, drummer, got to be playing the same song, same way, every time, no mistakes, get it done right. You're reading a goddamn sheet of music. That drummer should be playing that sheet of music. The bass player should be playing the sheet of music. And if the bass player and the drummer can't play the song without the keyboard and the guitarist player playing, fire the sons of bitches and bring in somebody who can.
Think of an entire day at the UMX. 2 days of the UMX.
I don't deal with amateurs.
I mean, and you spend 2 days listening to what roughly it used to be like 40 bands a day. They get 10 minutes on a stage, go to the next stage for 10 minutes. These are the People's Fair auditions. Your ears will bleed. You have to be really good to prove to everybody in your 10-minute set of 2 songs that you deserve to be up there on the stage at the People's Fair. You got to bring your A game, you got to be good, you got to be tight, you have had to have practiced. And it would be good for me if you dressed for the stage.
Yes, I agree.
You know, don't wear that jeans and t-shirts that you're going to wear when you go shopping at Walmart.
That's okay. That's okay.
Not always.
Not always.
Not always, and it depends on what you play.
Situation, it's okay.
But not always. You know?
If you're trying to get a job, if you're trying to please a 41 or 42-year-old woman and you're trying to get $1,000 out of, you better damn well look professional up on the stage.
Right.
I don't care if you wear shorts and a nice t-shirt. Look professional on stage. You look clean. Look like you're there to do business.
But you have to be good.
Yeah, you have to be good.
You have 10 minutes to bring those people in that are going to go, yeah, I'm going to vote for you because you were awesome. Otherwise, you can forget it. Suck.
Exactly.
Zero.
Same way with records.
After 2 hours of the UMX in the morning when you get up late and you go, not one of these bands can even keep me awake. Gotta be good.
I just want to add to what Shirley said. I've been in bands that haven't made it into festivals, and I've been in bands that have made it into festivals. And the common denominator, or the thing I've noticed, is the bands that put in the work. And it's a lot of work. I mean, there's the part where you show up and you do it on stage, but there's a lot of work that came before that. Any musician in the room can testify to that, I know. But sometimes it seems like you put a lot of work in, and then there's still a lot more work. It's fine sanding, it's rough sanding, it's just drilling and drilling and drilling and lots and lots of work. And going out and seeing those bands, like she's talking about, seeing the ones that suck. And they might not know it, they might think they're awesome. But you go out and watch those bands, and you watch the bands that are doing it, and don't treat those bands that are on the the $10,000 bands that are on stage. Those are people. Those are people that got together and worked and did that and they put in the work. They put in the hours.
10 years.
Don't act like you're in some different time zone than they are. You can get there, but it just takes an awful lot of work.
Let me add to that. I always wanted to be an A&R person. Hi, Mom. So I'm willing to come out and I will watch your band or yourself or whatever. I videotape because boy, there's nothing like a videotape, a good videotape. Now I realize an audition videotape is a little different, but just to give you an idea, there was a band that came from Oklahoma. They were pretty good, except the bass player insisted on turning around, and this was back in the days when we had the droopy drawers, and it was not a pretty sight. So I videotaped, I zoomed in on his lovely little back end, and I tell the bands, watch these videotapes 3 times. The first time you're going to go, well, we weren't so bad. And the second time through, you're going to go, don't know about that. And then the third time through, you're going to go, wow, I don't think we should do that again. Well, it took that bass player one time of watching his little back end. He promptly went over and got a much better fitting pair of jeans, and he never turned his back on the audience after that. He became one of the best bass players in Oklahoma, very much in demand. So if you can, set up a videos, the whole thing, all the way through. I've had bands that talk between every song. Oh my God, it drives you nuts. The appearance, one of the lead singers went back one time. He's back there brushing his beautiful long blonde hair. You could tell where everybody in the room was watching. They were watching him and not the guitar player with the great solo. So, do those things. If you've got one of the biggest problems, and they tell you this constantly on The Voice and on American Idol and all of them, is the lack of, well, they say connection with the audience. Basically, that's eye contact. You need to learn how to look at your audience. This bit about looking over their heads, and everybody can tell where you're looking. They know you're looking over their heads. So get that videotape done and really study it. Watch it 3 times so that you can become a third person. You can sit there and go, my God, I didn't realize that I sang every song with my eyes closed. Once you start singing with your eyes closed, the audience is out of there. And American Idol, The Voice, all of these groups, they will not pick. You think it's an automatic given that people sing with their eyes open, but they don't.
And so what you see on those shows is the finalists, the ones that could actually look at the audience without passing out. So anyway, our time is up. We would like to, if you want to talk to somebody in specific, you got a question, we'll spend a couple more minutes here. We were going to try to get out a little early tonight, but we're only down to 10 minutes tonight anyway. So let's thank our guests here and our impromptu, Chuck Hughes, Andy Yard, and Chris Kate.